Greetings and welcome to Tactical Inc., your portal to the captivating realm of all things Lorcana. I'm Bradley.
And I'm Alex. Today, we're going to focus on learning how to play Lorcana, a trading card game featuring characters from the world of Disney Animation Studios.
If you're new to the game, don't worry. We're here to guide you through the basics. For those familiar with Lorcana, stick around for some helpful tips, tricks, and perhaps even some surprising insights.
And please note that while playing Lorcana with more than 2 players is possible, in this video we're going to specifically discuss the gameplay just for a 2-player match.
Alright, so first up is getting the game started. To begin, both players will require a deck of 60 cards or more. You can assemble your decks by purchasing booster packs, singles, or opt for one of the many starter decks available in the Lorcana collection. If you seek guidance on building a deck or on enhancing a starter deck on a budget, check out our video links in the descriptions below.
Additionally, you're going to need a method for tracking your lore. Whether it's pencil and paper, a D20 dice, a calculator, or the official Lorcana trading card game app using its lore tracker, use whichever method is the most convenient for you and for your opponent. You're also going to need a way to visually represent the damage on your cards. This can be achieved using damage counters found in the various Lorcana products, using dice, or any small item that can fit on the card to indicate its damage.
As you gather your materials and prepare to play, remember the primary objective of the game: reach 20 lore before your opponent. There are multiple strategies to achieve this goal, each utilizing different card types.
So let's dive into the various card types that you're going to encounter in the game. Right now, Lorcana features 4 distinct card types. They are characters, items, actions, and the latest addition, locations, which was introduced in the 3rd set into the Inklands. Each one of these card types has unique attributes, so let's explore them individually.
First up is characters. As you can observe, there's several components to a character card, so let's break down the key elements.
So first up is the ink cost, and this ink cost is located at the top left of your card, which indicates the amount of ink required to play the card. The inkwell icon that is around that number denotes whether the card is inkable or if it's not inkable. We'll get into this a little bit more later. Now, if the inkwell icon is a simple hexagon like this card, Prince Eric, then it is considered uninkable. Robin Hood, however, has a more distinctive design around the hexagon. This means it is inkable.
Next up is the character name. In this case, it's Robin Hood. Below that is the version name, Champion of Sherwood. Version names are crucial for deck building, allowing up to 4 copies of each card with the same version name in a deck.
Then you have the strength and willpower, displayed on the right hand side, represented by symbols that resemble a sun and a shield respectively. For instance, Robin Hood has 3 strength and he has 6 willpower.
Below the name and version name is a symbol, indicating the character's ink color. There are 6 ink colors in the game, with Robin Hood's ink color being steel.
Moving on, we have the classifications that are found in the middle section. Some cards offer bonuses based on these classifications. For example, Hades, King of Olympus, gains lore for each villain controlled.
Next up are keywords. Though not every character possesses them, keywords are common abilities denoted in bold on the cards, with descriptions in parentheses. For more details, check out our keyword discussion video in the description below.
Then we'll move on to lore value. This represents what you need to win the game, located on the right of the card. Not all characters have lore. One such example is Maui Hero to All. So looking back at Robin Hood, you can see that he has 2 lore, gaining you 2 points towards your final goal of 20 to win the game.
Next, we have highlighted story names and abilities written on the card following that. Some characters may have multiple abilities, while others may have none, such as Lilo making a wish.
You also have the artist's name and set ID at the bottom left, which credits the artist who drew the card and providing the set ID number for collection tracking.
In the middle is the card's rarity symbol. There are typically 6 different symbols. The more points on the symbol indicates a higher rarity. We have common, uncommon, rare, super rare, legendary, and enchanted. However, there are promo symbols as well.
If you're building a deck for the first time and you're buying some of these cards, you'll notice that the legendary cards are going to typically be the most expensive, while the commons and uncommons are going to be cheaper and easier to get your hands on. Finally, we have the copyright information that's positioned at the bottom right of the card, providing copyright details. So now let's jump into actions. These cards resemble character cards in appearance, but upon activation, they are discarded from play. Unlike characters, actions lack strength, willpower, and lore value. They're simply played, used, and then discarded.
Also, unlike characters, actions don't have version names and do not possess story-based names. When you activate the action, it's called an effect and not an ability like the other card types.
Certain actions may be classified as songs, which is a special type of action, such as Let It Go. Songs feature parentheses in their effect box, enabling them to be played differently rather than simply paying for their ink cost. Songs have been proven to be a very powerful part of the game, and using them for free rather than paying their ink cost can be one way to really up your game.
Next is items. When played, they remain on the battlefield like characters. Similar to actions, items lack strength, willpower, and lore value. However, unlike actions, items have a story-based name featured in their ability box. For instance, this one is named Rebuild, with its ability listed beside it.
The last card type which we have, which you have to turn sideways to read, is called a location. Locations, like characters and items, remain on the field and they are played sideways. They also feature version names like characters. While they have willpower on the right side of the card like characters, they have no strength. Instead, they have a move cost on the left side of the card. This cost can be paid to move a character you control to this location. Similar to characters, they have story-based names, abilities, and lore.
Now that we have a basic understanding of the card types, let's get into the most exciting part, the gameplay. First, players determine who goes first. This can be done by flipping a coin, rolling a die, playing rock, paper, scissors, or whatever you wish. The winner of the result chooses whether they want to go first or second. One thing to note, if you go first, you do not draw on your first turn.
Now both players will start by shuffling their deck and present it to each other to allow for cutting the deck. Then each player draws 7 cards. Remember to keep your cards hidden from your opponent unless a card effect states otherwise.
If you're not satisfied with certain cards in your hand, you can opt to mulligan. One at a time, starting with the first player, you may choose which cards from your initial hand you want to mulligan, if any at all. During this process, you can place as many cards from your hand at the bottom of your deck without revealing them. Then draw cards until you have 7 again. Afterwards, shuffle your deck and present it to your opponent for cutting it once more.
Mulligans can significantly impact your chances of getting the cards that you need and can greatly influence the outcome of the game. So learning how to mulligan the right way to get the cards you want is extremely important. Now that we're prepared, let's jump into some Lorcana action.
As you play the game, each player's turn is divided into 2 parts. You have your beginning phase and your main phase. The beginning phase consists of 3 parts: ready, set, and draw.
In the ready step, you will ready all of your exerted cards. Exerting cards means that they're turned sideways. For instance, Elsa Snow Queen lets you exert her to activate her ability. Once a card is exerted, you can't activate its ability or ready the character until your ready step on the following turn, or due to another card effect. Challenging and questing also exert your characters, but we'll cover challenging and questing later in the video.
The next step is set. In this step, you're checking for effects that activate at the start of your turn, whether initiated by you or your opponent. For example, Donald Duck Perfect Gentleman's effect states, at the start of your turn, each player may draw a card. This means that during the set step, this effect will activate.
The third step is to draw. This is pretty straightforward. Here you simply draw a card from the top of your deck. A reminder, if you opted to go first, you don't draw a card on the very first turn.
After these 3 steps of the beginning phase, we get into the main phase. There are several steps you can take during your main phase, and there is no order to these steps.
So you can add a card into your inkwell. In your inkwell, you'll play ink cards face down to be used to cover the ink cost of the cards that you're going to play from your hand. Once per turn, you may reveal a card to your opponent and add it to your inkwell face down. Remember, this must be a card that has the inkwell icon. You cannot place cards with a simple hexagon into your inkwell, unless something says otherwise, such as a card like Fishbone Quill. Now, the more cards that you have in your inkwell, the more options you'll have. To add to your inkwell, reveal the chosen card to your opponents before placing it face down in your inkwell as ink.
Each card in your inkwell represents one ink, regardless of its front content. Once placed, the cards remain in your inkwell for the duration of the game, with their front content becoming irrelevant, so choose wisely.
And remember that once the card is placed face down, you are not allowed to look at it for the remainder of the game. Now, there are cards with effects that can add additional ink into your inkwell each turn, such as A Friend Like Me, One Jump Ahead, or Bell Strange But Special. These effects do not count to adding a card from your hand into your inkwell once per turn.
Another thing you can do is play a card during your main phase. To play a card from your hand, you reveal the card to your opponent and place it on your side of the board. You then pay the cost of the card located on the upper left-hand side of the card. To pay the cost, you must exert cards in your inkwell to pay it. If you do not have enough ink to pay the cost, return that card to your hand.
Now, when you play a character card, put the character above your inkwell on the board. Unless the card states otherwise, the character enters the field in the ready position. We'll talk more about positions of cards later on. When you play a character, they stay on the field unless removed from challenges or effects.
Unless a character has a special effect or keyword, the character cannot do anything the first turn it is played except move to a location. In Lorcana, this is known as letting the ink dry. However, the shift mechanic can get you around this. If you already have a character in play for one turn, you can then play a shift character on a different turn on top of it, and there is no need for its ink to dry.
Locations and items you place on the board as well above your inkwell. Unlike characters, these cards can be used right away. No need for ink to dry. Locations are played sideways. On your turn, you have the option to move one of your characters to any of your locations by covering the location's move cost. Your characters are restricted to moving only to your own locations, not those of your opponents.
And a character can move to a location the same turn it or the location is played, regardless of whether the character is exerted or even ready. There is no restriction on the number of characters that can occupy a location at a time. However, a character cannot move from a location unless it is to relocate to another location, which requires paying the move cost of the new location or due to a card effect.
If one of your locations is banished, the characters that are at that location simply fall off the location, nothing happens to them. So at the beginning of your turn, accumulate lore equivalent to the lore value of each location you have in play. Note this is distinct from questing. Questing is for characters only. When you play an action card, you resolve the effect stated on the card, and then it's sent to the discard pile. Cards in your discard are to be placed face up for everyone to see.
There's ways of changing the cost of cards, such as lantern, or using songs, or even the keyword that we talked about before, shift. If so, pay those costs instead of the cost in the upper left-hand corner.
Another thing you may do is activate activated abilities. During your turn, you can utilize abilities of various items and characters, which typically impact other cards in play. Cards in a player's deck, discard pile, hand, or inkwell are not considered in play, and they are unaffected by other cards unless they're specifically stated.
An ability on a card states its cost before its effect. The cost may comprise an exertion symbol, an ink cost symbol, text detailing the cost, or a blend of these elements. Each aspect of an ability's cost must be paid to activate the ability. Characters with ink that has not dried cannot trigger their abilities unless stated otherwise.
Remember, for the ink to dry, that means that the character has to have been in play for at least one turn. In addition to exerting to activate abilities, there's other ways that cards may be exerted. Exerting a card involves rotating it sideways. Once a card is exerted, it cannot be exerted again until it is readied by a game rule or a card effect. To ready a card, simply return it to its upright position. Remember to ready all your exerted cards at the beginning of your turn. There are also location cards that have abilities that can be activated. These can be activated the turn they are played.
Another thing you can do during your main phase is quest with a character whose ink is dry. To quest with a character, you exert one character you control and acquire lore equal to its lore value. Characters with the reckless keyword are unable to quest.
And finally, the last thing you could choose to do is challenge with any of your characters whose ink is dry or who have the keyword rush. Questing secures victory, yet occasionally stopping your opponents from gaining lore themselves can be a necessary thing to do. That's where challenging comes into play. You'll want to begin by exerting one of your characters to initiate the challenge. Then you'll select an opponent's exerted character or a location that they control to challenge. Remember, ready characters cannot be challenged unless you have a character such as Cinderella Stout-Hearted.
Both characters involved in the challenge inflict damage. Evaluate each character's strength and apply that amount of damage to the opposing character. When a character accumulates damage counters equal to or exceeding their willpower, they are banished and placed into its owner's discard pile.
A new feature was released in Into the Inklands that allows players to transfer damage counters between characters and locations, such as Maleficent Mistress of Evil. This transfer is not considered dealing damage or damaging the chosen cards.
Once you've selected your actions and opt out of taking any further steps, you pass your turn to your opponent. The first person who reaches 20 or more lore first wins the game. Additionally, if you try to draw a card but can't because your deck is empty, you lose the game.
Lorcana is a game that really is a race to the finish line. And finding that balance of how to get there quicker than your opponent definitely takes time, so don't be discouraged if in the beginning it takes some work figuring out all the kinks.
And this is just a very simple video on how to play this game. For further rules, check out the link below in the description.
So that is the game of Lorcana. We hope that this video was a useful tool to help you get started on this enchanted journey.
Be sure to follow us on social media to keep up to date on the latest Tactical Ink news. And also be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you can tune in every Friday for a new episode of Tactical Ink.
See you next week.